Stephen Bartlett called your TEDx talk the #1 talk every entrepreneur should watch.
The other thing that it enabled me to realize is that sometimes, and this applies to in companies and in cultures that we're building in our businesses, if we have the people, like the right people in the wrong role, they can sometimes come across as incompetent or frustrating when really it's about finding.
Amazing, Mark. Thank you so much. There were so many times where I wanted to jump in and ask more questions and add to what you're saying, but I wanted to just let you keep going. Such a
Sorry, that's a
powerful
lot.
story.
That was a lot.
No,
Sorry.
so good. Don't apologize. So good. And inspired is inspiring. And, the 3 parts of your story, or the 3 separate vignettes that you told us there, I could definitely see you bringing the story framework, your storytelling framework to life. And Mark, I've used that so many times in corporate environments, in personal environments. I often reference you and your book when I say this is a storytelling framework that I'd highly recommend. Welcome to the Liberating Greatness Podcast, the show where we explore what it takes to unlock your full potential and make a meaningful impact in the world. I'm your host, John Roussot, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our special guest today, Mark Leruste. Mark is a sought-after leadership communication expert, best-selling author of Glow in the Dark, and founder of Storycast. He's helped over 5,000 leaders at top global brands such as Google, Nike, L'Oreal, and the Premier League leverage the power of storytelling to build trust and inspire action. Mark's TEDx talk, What They Don't Tell You About Entrepreneurship, has over 1.3 million views and was named by Stephen Bartlett as the must-watch TEDx talk for entrepreneurs. He's a friend and a mentor of mine, and I know that he will help us liberate greatness today. And in this conversation, you'll hear powerful insights, personal stories, and timeless wisdom to help you lead with vision, live with purpose, and liberate your greatness. Let's dive in. Mark, welcome to the show.
Now that is an intro, John. I'm pumped up. I'm just like, I want to listen to this episode. I'm like, oh wait, we are the episode.
We are the episode. Well, yeah. Amazing. It's Mark, so good to have you here. And as you know, you were one of the main reasons and key people that inspired this podcast a few years ago. So here we are. So grateful to have you on the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing, Mark. Well, I've got loads of questions I want to ask you about your book, about your TEDx talk, about the work that you're doing in corporates. But before we dive in, what's been on your heart or your mind lately that you feel called to share with the world?
What a beautiful question. I think I would have to answer the fact that, so I just came back from another sort of leadership program where I ran a session for Nike, and a lot of it was around storytelling for impact. So the idea was they brought together a lot of their non-for-profit leaders and the people involved in their impact branch. So Nike has an impact branch where they effectively invest and give back to communities that are helping, for example, young girls to access sports, or equity-seeking communities looking to have more access to sports, so how to actually leverage sport as a vehicle for connection and growth and leadership skills and that kind of stuff, including in South Africa. There was an amazing gentleman who came from representing a foundation that helps kids who, as a result of multiple reasons, are amputated in some way, shape, or form, or might be missing a limb, and as a result, don't have access to school or can't go to regular school. And so anyway, all of these amazing foundations and impact leaders, right? And one of the things that became really clear is that you can have one of the most amazing organizations or businesses or product or services, but if your ability to communicate that amazing organization, product or services is subpar to your impact, the only thing the world will see is that. And that breaks my heart, because I think every organization that is trying to make a difference, every company that's trying to make an impact deserves to be seen, heard, and understood and cut through the noise. And I think that at this second, when you asked me that question, that came up, and really yearning to continue my mission to spread the knowledge around how to share stories that make a difference, how to make leaders feel comfortable to show up a little bit more about, as themselves, to share more personal stories in service of their audience, not in a therapy session context, in a business context. So yeah, that's a bit of a ramble, but that's what's on my mind.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks, Mark. And we're going to dive deep into that because you are such a master at inspiring people to really connect with their stories and to help, package stories in a way that communicates clearly what the business product or service or offering is, how they serve with connection to the people that they're serving and the audience that they're speaking to. So I'm looking forward to diving into that a little bit more. When you think of the word greatness, what does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, it's and actually, I don't know if people can see your books up there, by the way.
Amazing. Thank you.
And yeah, I think greatness is the full expression of your full potential. I think in a really simple way, that's the way I say it. And I think it's very dependent on what that means to you. So your definition of greatness might be slightly different than mine or the person listening to this, right? So there's no judgment in what greatness should be, but I love the idea of like it's the full expression of your full potential. It's your ability to give back, to serve. It's your ability to feel whole. It's your ability to grow, to learn, to risk, to dare, to contribute, and just be a full expression as a leader, really. And go to your depth. I mean, this is one of the things that keeps me up at night. Like I often get the question, what keeps you up at night? For me, it's the idea that we go to our grave with our song unsung. And in my particular case, it's story, right? So like I believe in sharing your personal story can transform your business and change your life. So I think greatness is having the courage to live a full life, whatever that means to you.
Amazing, amazing. Full expression of your full potential, courage to live your own greatness. And it is different for all of us, Mark. I think that's the beautiful thing about this idea of liberating someone's greatness is that it's unique to them. And how do we help them liberate their greatness as their gift to themselves, to their family, their friends, their loved ones, and the gift that they get to share with the world. And that's going to be unique for every single person. So I love the fact that we share that same philosophy. And thank you for referencing my book and for the great praise report that you wrote.
It's a great book. It's a great book,
man.
not just because you got an amazing praise, of the book, but it really, I mean, I knew it, people listening to this, whether this is the first episode or a series down the line, your ability to stay optimistic and joyful in the face of adversity, especially with your background and your story, and the belief that everyone has the capacity for greatness, and even when people don't have that belief, that you will hold that belief for them until they kind of come around to see it, is one of the reasons why I jumped in wholeheartedly when I got an email saying, hey, John would love to get you on the podcast. Like, yes, count me in. Anything that you touch is going to be something inspiring. So yeah, I'm here.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark. And that's support and, admiration is mutual. Anything that you do, my heart to serve and support you and cheer you on. It's just so great to see that, the impact that you're making in the world. So thank you again. So Mark.
And can I just say, anybody uncomfortable listening to this, like, why these two don't just get a room? Here's something I just want to name that. No, but I really love that. And I'm saying this to you because I want you to own it, but also I'm saying this to people listening because I think it's something that people can take away. One of the things I've noticed about you, and in terms of greatness and leadership impact, is you are always rooting for others. You are always championing others. You're always looking for ways to support. Like I remember when my book came out, you were like, I'm going to buy like 10 books. You have this contagious enthusiasm for people's projects and impact. And the reason why I'm saying this is not just to sort of blow smoke, up your behind. It's that I think we can all learn from that. I think we can all be a little bit better at championing others instead of seeing each other as potential competition or feeling inadequate because someone's doing better than us or maybe feeling jealous, like all these sort of fear-based responses. I'd love for people to listen to this and go, hey, that if I'm uncomfortable with hearing, two people celebrate each other, what is something I can take from that and how can I practice that a little bit more?
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. I think both you and I have an abundance mindset and also recognize there is such a need in the world for people like you and I to serve, to encourage others, to inspire hope and to inspire action that moves people forward, that moves businesses forward. And we can't do that alone, right? So to be able to encourage each other, support each other, that's definitely the right way to do that. And I appreciate you saying that in the collaboration between us. Mark, so take us back a little. Today, you're known as a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, a TEDx speaker, and the founder of Storycast. But every remarkable journey has a beginning. Can you take us back to the moment or series of moments where you first set yourself on this path of helping leaders harnessing the power of their story?
I'm going to share 3 stories, if that's okay.
Go
I
for
think
it.
3. If you had to take like a time machine, and I could take you and the audience with us to sort of go back in time, like almost like the ghost of the past. You know that I forgot what like Christmas Carol kind of movie.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So I would start off at the first place I'd go back to is childhood. So I would take you back to when I'm around 6 years old, and I am born in a dual heritage household. So my mum's British and Welsh, and my dad's French. And so we spoke English at home, which was different than the language we spoke outside of home, which was in France. And so I didn't know it back then, but I have dyslexia, which means that I just see the world differently. And I also have ADHD, which means that my mind bounces all over the place. Those 2 things can be great things when harnessed and in a creative way. They can also be quite challenging if you're raised in an archaic educational system, like in France in the 80s and 90s, right? And so I would go to school and I would make my class laugh because I was kind of the class clown, but also the teachers, particularly 2 teachers that I have in mind at 2 fundamental, foundational years of my life, were really cruel to me. And I don't think I've used this word out loud before, but yeah, they were really cruel in the sense that they would mock me publicly in front of the whole class because I couldn't spell, I couldn't read out loud, I couldn't do basic maths. And they just thought I was lazy, that I wasn't paying attention, that I was doing on purpose. It's just that I just really, really struggled, right? And so those years formed me in a way in 2 folds. And I think it's relevant to this. On one fold, I really bought into the belief that I'm inadequate, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not lovable because I can't spell, therefore I'm stupid. The other thing that it enabled me to realize is that sometimes, and this applies to in companies and in cultures that we're building in our businesses, if we have the people, like the right people in the wrong role, they can sometimes come across as incompetent or frustrating when really it's about finding what it is, the gift that they have that can best contribute. And in my case, I happen to have a mom who is a school teacher, and she was adamant about getting school kids to experience theater because she was a thespian buff, and she, I think deep down, probably would have loved to be in the theater, in the sort of a director in the stage, putting up of plays. And she ended up being a teacher, and so she would put up these school plays for kids. And she had my older brother and me, and obviously she couldn't leave us in the car for a whole day or leave us home alone for a whole day. So she would take us along with her to the rehearsals. And my brother didn't necessarily enjoy the process so much. I loved it. And I would be like a bush in the back of like this set, or I would be a backup dancer in Grease or in West Side Story. And there was one particular moment, I must have been about 7 years old. My mum put up a school production play of the musical Bugsy Malone. And for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a funny sort of like kids dressed up as gangsters, and they shoot foam out of guns. And it's like, anyway, so it's based in the US during Prohibition years, I think. And there's a scene where the ventriloquist came out, and all my whole role, right, for this whole play, I was the ventriloquist puppet. Okay. So I had no words. And I can tell you right now, John, I remember like if it was yesterday, right? And I come on stage, it's in the theater Fontainebleau, my hometown, sold out crowd. And I'm just like acting out like a puppet. So people who can't see this, I'm sort of like just mimicking my mouth opening, and everybody's laughing. And for the first time, I'm seeing the impact that I can have on an audience. And I walked off that stage, and adults came up to me and were like, "You were amazing. I thought you were a real puppet. Like, you should consider going into theater or becoming that," whatever. The point was, it was the first time I heard adults praise me.
That validation.
Yeah. And I was like, I know what it feels like to feel invisible. I know what it feels like to feel like you've got something worth sharing, but you somehow can't get it out, or you can't seem a way to get people to pay attention to you. So that, I think, was like a really formative anchor point as to the work I do today. Because ironically, in my school reports, all the criticisms I had made me a really good keynote speaker today. The ability to talk, to be comfortable on stage, to make people feel seen. all this kind of stuff, adding a bit of humor. Now, I would fast forward to another point in time, which is when I am sitting on the edge of my bed. It's 2009. I've just had a really bad breakup. I've quit my corporate job. I've moved from, at the time I was living in South America, came back to live at my parents' house, feeling pretty down. I didn't really have words for it. And I think now you would probably call it situational depression, if I'm being honest. It just, mental health wasn't spoken about the same way that it is today, right? And you'll know this.
Yeah.
I just knew I struggled, and I'm a social person. I'm kind of an extrovert, although now I've appreciated the qualities of being with an introvert. Means that I've actually really enjoy the qualities of being an introvert. So I'm probably more of an ambivert, if I'm being honest, but I am very much so extrovert. So I would normally go out and meet people. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to see anybody. I was going to bed really late, getting up really late. I was spending a lot of time just watching videos online. I was a bit of a shadow of my former self. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed. My mum comes in through the door, and I look at her and I say, Mum, I think I'm depressed. And she looks at me without even skipping a beat, and she goes, don't tell anyone, not even Dennis. Wow. Dennis is my childhood best friend, right? And I say this now, I talk about it in my book, and my mum was doing her best. And the reason why, because that's why I said, why? And she goes, because no one's going to give you a job. And I remember having this anchor belief of, if I say that I'm struggling, if I show that I'm hurting or vulnerable, I'm going to be rejected. And it's not her fault. I say this, I want to be very clear. It's not her fault. She was doing her best. She didn't know better. It was a very different time than it is today, right? And so the third place I would then take you into like a little capsule. I would fast forward to a few years later. I discovered Movember, the foundation that focuses on men's health issues, typically prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and men's mental health linked to suicide and physical inactivity. And for those of you who don't know, they're a charity that get men typically to grow mustaches during the month of November, formerly known as November, now known as Movember. And I sort of came across their website and really loved the way that they were talking about a very serious issue in a way that was kind of fun and light. And I resonated with it. So I grew a mustache, asked a few people to give me money. They thought it was ridiculous, but I was really happy. It gave me a sense of meaning. It gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of community. It gave me some values to live by, some rules and guidelines. It just gave me a bit of a spark, really. And but they didn't exist in France. And then I did it again the following year. And I was looking to do something different. I wanted to do a sort of change career. I wasn't really happy in particular in the job I was doing. And a friend of mine said as a joke, you should work for Movember. You pretty much do it for free anyway. And so I thought Movember was like Halloween, right? Like if I told you, oh, did you know that Halloween is actually about a kid's charity that have diabetes, and we all dress up and sort of get candy for like this? And you'd be like, really? That's the thing? So that's how I thought Movember was. Turns out it's one of the biggest global men's health charity in the world. I mean, they've raised over $1.2 or $1.3 billion, right? Wow. In the 20 years that they exist. So it's a legit charity. So I get, long story short, I do a video CV that goes viral. I get in touch with the founder, co-founder and CEO at the time, Adam Garoni. I get a meeting with the other co-founder, JC, in London, tell them a bit more about my story, tell them about how I entered an MMA competition with zero background in training, because I thought it'd be funny to go in there with a mustache and raise some money. Terrible idea. Got my right knee busted, but that's another conversation. Wow. I know that you're a black belt badass. And he's like, basically gives me the job on the spot, right? He puts his hand out and says, welcome to the team. I'm not going to try and make an Australian accent because I'm terrible. And here I am, right? Tasked with launching this foundation in France, in Switzerland, and growing it in Belgium and Spain. So I get to the launch of France. It's September 2012. I'm sitting in a dingy bar. It's the smell of beer still present on the floorboards, right? There's a few people, handful of people in the room. I've got my questionable mustache, and I've got a few slides about Movember. I kind of talk about why Movember matters, what the mission is, what we intend to do in France, all that stuff. We get to the Q&A. A journalist puts her hand up, and I get the question. She said, "This is all great, but why did you feel compelled to do this? Like, why did you want to become, the country director of France?" And I remember, John, at this particular moment, I had this sort of choice to make. On one side, I heard my mum's voice. Don't tell anyone. You're not going to be, I just thought it was career suicide. If I talk about the fact that I was struggling and that Movember helped me get out of a bit of a dark place, and now I want to help spread that message to get more men to open up and talk about, I was afraid, and I know it sounds ridiculous now, but I was really afraid that I would achieve the very opposite of my mission, right? That it would just bomb the campaign. Or I could just say, oh, because I'm really inspired, it's a great foundation, and double down on that. And for whatever reason, I can't tell you why, I chose, and my heart was beating, I had sweaty palms, my throat was dry, and I just said, honestly, I said, a couple of years ago, I was going through a really dark time. I didn't have the words to express what I was going through. I came across, I just opened up about it. Yeah. I thought I was going to get tomatoes thrown at me. I thought the world was going to open. My world was going to shatter. I thought I was going to get disconnection. The opposite happened. What I got was connection. And this guy called Matt came up to me at the end. And I talk about this in the book, but he came up to me and he's like, I just wanted to thank you because I've never seen or heard a guy talk about what I've also been through.
Wow.
And I just want to thank you for that. And also I'm going to get my colleagues and friends to take part. My team and I ended up raising 2.8 million euros for men's health.
Incredible.
We got 110,000 people to sign up. We won a bunch of awards every single year. And I have no doubt in my mind that one of the reasons, they used to call it the Rusty effect. So when I'd go into market to promote and try and inspire and enroll and engage people, you'd see spikes in registrations where I'd go. And my boss would call it the Rusty effect because my nickname at Movember is Rusty. So everyone knows me as Rusty.
Right.
This is a bit of a scoop for you here, John.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And they used to call it the Rusty effect. So the registers would go up. And the reason being is that this is what I try and teach leaders. Inspired is inspiring. And I was so inspired by the mission and vision and what we were trying to do that when I talked about it, I'm contagious. Right? Like I just had this energy about it that I was just like, this is why it's so exciting. This is happening. You need to be part of it. And I would enroll and engage people. And I'll finish with this because I think it sort of bridges to what we're talking about today. I came to a point where I was like, can this only be possible? Right? So I was thinking my personal story to the company story, that combination of me being personal, authentic, but also of service was a really powerful combo. And I was going into companies like Google's and Gillette's and banks and you name it, right? Sports clubs, huge premiership teams and stuff. And I would often come across people who said to me, November's my favorite month of the year. And I was like, why? And they would say why. And I was like, okay, but what about the rest of the year? And they'd say, oh no, I don't feel as connected to the work I do. I don't feel like we engage as much. I don't feel like I know my colleagues as much. And it got me really sad. I was like, if looking like Freddie Mercury for a month is the highlight of the year, what are we doing wrong as a society, as business leaders, as companies, as cultures? And so I started researching and experimenting with, can you have the same enthusiasm that I had for Movember and others had for Movember, even if you're not in a nonprofit? And that's how the journey began. L'Oreal were the first client to bring me in to talk about it. And then little by little, word of mouth, exposure, I decided to go and talk about this mission, I guess, on a different level. And I've been incredibly honored and blessed that over the last 8 years, I've got to go and speak to some incredible teams, work with some incredible leaders around the undeniable power that personal storytelling has to engage people, to align people, and to help people take action.
Amazing, Mark. Thank you so much. There were so many times where I wanted to jump in and ask more questions and add to what you're saying, but I wanted to just let you keep going.
Sorry, that's a lot. Story. That was a lot.
No, it's so good. Don't apologize. So good. And inspired is inspiring. And, the 3 parts of your story, or the 3 separate vignettes that you told us there, your experience at school, the labels that teachers put on you, that in retrospect, you look back and say, actually, those are the things that are making you successful now. Your ability to speak and to, be bold and courageous and speak up is just so powerful. How you then found a space on stage where you recognize that what you say, or what you do, even as a puppet, without saying anything at the time, you could positively impact the feeling that an audience experiences and the message that you deliver. So recognizing that, and often, purpose comes from pain. So having experienced that pain, and then the contrast of, actually, I can make a difference. I can have a voice. I can, positively impact an audience. such a great awareness moment for you. And then the situational depression, experiencing that to then get you to a place where you wanted to join Movember first as a volunteer, as an enthusiast, as a supporter, and then joining the organization, raising the 2.8 million euros, achieving awards, and that pivotal moment of vulnerability where you had that choice. And my heart started increasing as you were telling the story. And I know your story. I've read your story, you and I've spoken about it. But as you were talking through it, I could picture you in that moment thinking, I've got a choice to make here. Do I speak my truth and really tell people why I'm here? Or do I tell the light, surface level, maybe fluffy message that typically everybody would, potentially go to because it's easier to do that. It doesn't require open heart surgery. And you made that choice to be vulnerable. Vulnerability comes from a position of strength where you've now, at that point, you'd been on a journey, you had found a way out of your situational depression through November into a position of strength, which then allowed you to be vulnerable and share your message. And I can fully understand and respect and appreciate why the Rusty effect was the Rusty effect wherever you went, because
Yeah.
you do inspire people to action, Mark. It's really special. And then how that's led you to recognize that we can't only inspire people once 1 month a year. What are we doing for the other 11 months of the year, and how do we do this consistently? So your message of storytelling, incredibly powerful. I found myself thinking at two different levels, one being immersed in the stories that you were telling, and then at a meta level, thinking about the power of storytelling and how you were taking us through your framework of context and connection and conclusion, which you share in your book. I could
Did you
experience
see
that
that?
as you.
Were
I
you,
could see that.
could you see like, oh, that's the connection? Cool.
Yeah, for
I'm
those
not
of you,
like I do it so unconsciously now, but I
totally.
love that you picked that up. Do you want to explain to people what
Yeah,
that is? Because I
so
think
so
it's
I'm holding Mark's book here, and I'll link this in the show notes as well, Glow in the Dark. And Mark has such a great framework for storytelling, and there are so many different frameworks out there, the hero's journey and others that are very, very complex. What I love about Mark's framework, it's super simple. It talks about context, connection, and conclusion. And Mark explains in the book, set a little bit of context just to get people into the room. Like it was in this bar, you could smell the beer on the floorboards, a few people in the room. Enough context. Like we're all there in the room with Mark. Then there's connection. My heart's racing, my palms are sweaty. I've got this moment to answer this question that's just been asked. What do I do? There's connection because I felt that, and I know our listeners would have felt that as well. And then there's conclusion. When you speak a truth, you make 2.8 million euros for a charity because there's this Rusty effect. So I could definitely see you bringing the story framework, your storytelling framework to life. And Mark, I've used that so many times in corporate environments, in personal environments. I often reference you and your book when I say this is a storytelling framework that I'd highly recommend to leaders
appreciate you.
about to present in boardroom meetings, to say, strip away the fluff. What's the context? Connect with the audience, and then why did you tell me that story? Conclusion. So yeah, super
Nailed
powerful.
Nailed it, John.
Thank you.
I love it. And I love the fact that you were able to pick that, distill that, and translate that for people listening, because I think it's something that I keep on banging on, but storytelling doesn't have to be complicated. The one thing I'm going to add really quickly before your next question is that I forgot to say, I'm saying this and it sounds like I've got all my stuff together, right? And that, like, clearly after that episode of November, I learned my lesson. The truth is, I hadn't. And that translated in when I was invited to go and give a TEDx talk in Cardiff in 2017. I originally spent 6 months crafting a talk, which I thought sounded smart, which I thought would go down well. And it was something I can't even remember. I literally can't remember. I think the through line was, what you seek is clarity, what you need is courage, or something like that, right? It was all about, like, from the conversation I had on my podcast, what I learned, everyone thinks they need to have the clarity before they take the first step. Actually, no, they need to have the courage to take the first step. I go down this road, I talk about three-headed dragon. It was like this complete weird talk. 21 days before my TEDx talk, I start practicing my TEDx talk every single day with a different friend in a different part of London. so that I could reconnect to friends, discover different parts of London, and get feedback on my talk. That was objectively one of the most grueling things I've ever done, because every day I'd go there, I'd practice my 16, 17-minute talk, and I'd get blank faces, or I would get a bunch of notes, a bunch of feedback, not sure about this. So I'd go back that night, I'd change it, and I would repeat. About maybe a week out, I want to say 8 days out of the actual event, it was April. I think we were approaching the anniversary. Anyway, I basically had a meltdown. I'm like, this is not working. Why is it not working? And it wasn't working because I wasn't injecting anything personal, anything remotely authentic or real or vulnerable. It was just, look at this, so I'm safe. You know, I told you how as a kid I felt inadequate. I still have to fight that feeling because I always think I'm dumb, I'm stupid, people are going to find out. So if I sound smart, if I throw lots of facts and stats, put your attention over here, you're not going to see me, right? Smoke and mirrors. And for some reason, I was invited at an event. And I spoke that evening about something that I was really annoyed about. It was kind of like a bit of a talk right from the heart. And I was talking about how I was annoyed, how everyone was glorifying entrepreneurship, how everyone was talking about being a business owner, being a business leader is amazing, and it's the only thing we should all aspire to, when my own reality of starting my own business was really hard. I found like being a solopreneur, being a one-man band, incredibly lonely, incredibly difficult. And I just wasn't seeing anybody talking about it. So I felt more shame. And I spoke about this on stage. The resonance was like really like
Off the
pretty
charts.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was practicing the next day with Alex Mary, the founder of Mic Drop, a speaker coach. And he got me to Hyde Park Corner. For those who are outside of the UK and London, Hyde Park Corner is where if you're standing on something, you can say whatever you want and people can stop, listen to you, or keep walking by. So it's pretty nerve-wracking. And so he got me to stand on this little box. And I gave the TEDx talk I'd been practicing for 6 months. And Alex, if he listens to this, will agree 100%, has the worst poker face, right? He cannot fake. Like his face cannot basically betray his thoughts. And so I saw his face like someone just stole the jam out of his donut, right? And before he had time to give me feedback, I said, just before you have time, let me just share this other thing that I talked about last night, which for some reason I felt more resonant. Again, inspired is inspiring. And I share it and he goes, that's what you need to talk about. So with 8 days out, I completely changed my talk, completely changed the topic. I was terrified of it because I was actually going to show the world that I didn't have it all together, that my business wasn't perfect, that I was also struggling. And I remember going on that stage and kind of getting up those steps. Julie, I've never shared this before, so I'll say it here because I love you and I think you'll get this. Julie was pregnant with our eldest, and she gave me a guitar pick. And on that guitar pick, it said, "We're both with you," and it makes me emotional now.
Wow.
But it's like, you know, we're both with you, and you've got this. It was something like that, and I remember having it in my pocket right before going on stage. And the irony is that the 2 speakers before me on stage were all about quit your job, start your business. It's brilliant. And I was going on there going like, this is really hard. But I think the reason why my TEDx talk did so well and why Stephen Bartlett listed as, you know, the #1 out of the top 5 TEDx talks every entrepreneur should watch, was because I balanced my personal story, but I made it relevant to others and it was in service of. It wasn't like a therapy session on stage. I wasn't bleeding emotionally in front of my audience. I was very much like saying, hey, here's the reality that no one's talking about. And everybody thinks it's this thing, but actually you can find purpose in a company. You can find purpose being a family, you know. So I wanted to say that because I still have layers that I'm unpeeling. I still have resistance. I still have even me that still 100% believes about this. But that's why I'm so passionate to help leaders to do this work, because you said it so beautifully at the start. It's about connection.
So powerful, Mark. Thank you for that story. And please send Julia our best wishes and thanks for inspiring and encouraging you that you've got this and that you can share your message. And it's quite interesting, actually. Your initial thread was, you think you need clarity, but actually what you need is courage. And what you were trying to do was get clarity on your message and practicing it and
Yeah.
rehearsing it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
ultimately what you needed was the courage to say what's really on your heart and mind and talk about
Totally.
what they don't tell you about entrepreneurship, which was the title of
Yeah.
your TEDx talk. So powerful. So let's explore that a little bit more. So I've personally watched your TEDx talk a few times, and I actually watched it this morning again whilst I was on the treadmill. I just wanted to, just go through your content again. And you delivered such a masterful presentation there, Mark. You had me laughing in the beginning, almost crying in the middle, recognizing some of those critical pain points that we go through as entrepreneurs. And by the end of it, I was inspired again, full of hope for the future. So masterfully delivered. And as you said, that Stephen Bartlett called your TEDx talk the #1 talk every entrepreneur should watch. What do you think really resonated so deeply? And what advice would you give to leaders today about standing out and being heard in a noisy world?
Okay. So part of it is luck. I'm just going to say it, right? It's part of it is luck. It's like I don't know who shared at some point. So I don't want to minimize the importance that that played. However, if I had to break it down, and because I still get messages randomly, not as much as I used to, but I still get messages from people saying thank you for that. I felt really seen. And if you look at all the comments, I mean, some of them are horrific. By the way, I want to say this: anybody who thinks that when you put yourself out there, you're not going to get criticism when you get to a certain place. It's the opposite. Some of the comments are just awful. Like if you look at the comments, it's just like, there's nothing worse than people who aren't comedians trying to be funny. This is the worst TEDx talk I've ever seen. I used to show on screens. I don't know if I did it with you when I was leading your KPI profile or not, but anyway, I used to show this in presentation keynotes when I used to say, if you think I don't get attacked, I do. And I would show all the different comments, and people were like laughing and in shock sometimes. So if I had to break it down, first one is, again, inspired is inspiring. I talk about something which was real to me. It was really real. Like I really believed in this. So I'm really good at engaging and enrolling people when I believe in what I'm saying. I'm not good when I have to sell something I don't believe in, or if I'm trying to engage, you know what I mean? So that's number one. Like you've got to be aligned with your message. The second thing is no particular order, by the way. I'm going to try and distill this because I've never broken it down. So I'm going to try and do my best. When I was practicing, in the lead up the last week before I went on that stage, I got to hang out with a friend of mine called Amrish Shah. Big shout out to Amrish. We were in Hampstead Heath on a bench, and he offered to like listen, right? And so I do my new version of the talk. And he goes, "Can I be real with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's a boring, like there's no personality injected. Like you're so much more than just that." Because he'd seen me at uni. I think the last play I did was probably in my second year of university, I think, or first year. First year, sorry. So first year of university. I was not a drama student. I was business and European management. But I joined like this audition to get into plays, and I got cast as this sort of city buffoon role in this Greek tragedy. So my brother included and my friends there, and Amrish thought I was just sabotaging the play because it was such a sort of paradox with what was going on. But anyway, so he saw me being a bit more funny, right? And he was effectively saying, you need to really exaggerate that first part where you're talking about the stereotypical influencer entrepreneur on social media, right? Just make it really ridiculous. So he's the one who gave me the great direction on that. And so if you go back and see my TEDx talk, what I had was a hook. So that's why I say to leaders all the time. That's why I said to the leaders, I just came back from Nike and I was in Barcelona before with the other company. So have a hook. A hook comes in many different shapes and forms. There are lots of different ways. It can be a story. It can be a stat. It can be a powerful question. It can be a prompt. It could be a video. It could be, there's loads of different ways of doing a hook. But what I didn't do is I didn't go on the stage and said, thank you so much for having me at this event. I'm really grateful to be here. And today I'm going to talk to you about the power of purpose. And, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I got straight into it. the honest truth is I had practiced that opening a couple of times with people like 2 or 3 days before, and it bombed. My friends
Really?
just weren't laughing. Yeah. My friends weren't laughing. And I was like, man, this is terrible. To the point where Judy says this story. She says when she was in the audience and I delivered my first line and you hear people laugh and you can hear it in my voice. There's a bit of a release or a relief.
Yeah.
She was like, you're going to be fine. Like as soon as I got that first laugh, you're like, you're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine.
And so because people got it, right? Like there was a risk that people weren't getting that I was being a joke. Because I'm sort of going, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I visualize my goals, and before you even had time to scroll on social media, I've drank my green smoothie, and I don't need to wake up. I don't have an alarm because
yoga.
Yeah, right. So I'm making all the stereotypes, which still hold true to this day, by the way, in a weird way. So I think that's another part. I think it's almost I don't know what the word is, forever green in a way. It wasn't like historical context dependent and specific to that time. I think it's sort of still true to this day.
Yes.
We're almost 10 years out and a lot of the stuff that I talk about is still true. So that's number one. I varied in the emotions. So if you think about it, as you said, you beautifully said it, I think, but I didn't intentionally design this, by the way. I didn't know as much as I know today of crafting stories. I hadn't written Glow in the Dark. I hadn't, interviewed people for 10 years on my podcast. I think what I did is I intentionally played, and this is my natural impact when I go into companies. It's one of the things when I'm asked, like, what makes you different as a speaker? I have an ability to mix depth and lightness and humor, right? So I can talk about something heavy and then I can make you laugh. I can make you cry. I can take you through these emotions. So there was range. That's another thing I would say. There was range in my pace. I would slow down to make a point. I would speed up when I'm excited. And then I think, we can't neglect the fact that I was willing to share something quite personal and vulnerable that most people would think it's career suicide again. And I shared something real, but it was for the benefit of the audience. It was not about like, love me, like me, pity me, save me. It was very much like, I'm telling you this because there are so many people who go through this and nobody's talking about it. Why? Because we think tears don't sell. I still remember that line. And then I pivoted. Right, I pivoted to the point that I was trying to make. Yes. So I leveraged my story as a bridge to land the point I'm trying to make, which is really important. Right, when I say to business leaders, listen to this, 100% get better and more comfortable and braver to share your personal stories. Always do it in service of others because it's about you, but it's not for you.
Yes.
I'm going to say that again. Your story is about you, but it's not for you. That's the real, like even just before jumping on this call, I was talking to a leader about this. So I made it about them. I then sort of mapped out these stories of different moments in time where we were all obsessed with purpose and why we need these things in our lives to find meaning and fulfillment. And I sort of come to the end, and after sharing a few different examples where I kind of put it back saying, look, we are hardwired to seek meaning and purpose and being part of an exciting story. But being an entrepreneur is not the only way you can do that. It's one of the ways, but there are so many different ways you can do it. You can express yourself through art. You can express yourself through the work that you do. You can express yourself being as a parent. Like there are just different ways that you can find that thing. And we got to start buying into the belief that the only way to be happy is to be an entrepreneur. And then I kind of finished with a sort of you can, the way you finish your talk, there's lots of different ways you can do it. You can do it by a sort of a question, an invitation, a takeaway, a tip. Like there's lots of different ways you can finish it, but finish it strong. And I think I finished it by basically saying like, I just think the world would be a better place if everybody had a sense of purpose, no matter how big or small that was. And that was it. Yeah. And my biggest regret, I'll tell you this for anybody listening who's thinking about doing a TEDx talk, and I've since told this to a bunch of people doing TEDx talks that I've mentored, soak it in, stay on stage, take a moment, soak it in. I was so eager to get off that stage because I was like nervous. There were 400 people clapping, and my regret is I didn't take a moment to soak it in. I did when I won an award for my book, and when I was on stage, I made sure to pause and soak it in and be with the discomfort of presence. Yeah.
So good, Mark. Thank you for that. That in itself was a masterclass, just talking us through the structure of your TEDx talk. And I've taken a few notes here that I'll put into the show notes as well. Have a good hook, the range, the pace, make it personal, vulnerable, and then your key message,
Yeah.
that it's in service of others. Your story is in service of others. It's about you, but it's in service of others.
Yeah.
And you pivoted right at the end to encourage people that the world would be a better place if everyone lived with purpose. And that just, powerful, powerful ending as well. So,
The one thing
thank
I'd
you for
add
taking us
is I
through
gave
that.
examples. The only thing I would add in all of that is, if you remember, because I haven't seen it in a while, but from memory, I share stories to illustrate my point. So I
Yes,
kind of, and do you remember, like I talk about the sort of mission to Mars, and I talk about my Heaven Shake story, and so
that's right.
I sort of
And the
illustrate.
artist as well.
Yeah, right, Laurie.
Yeah.
I forgot her
Yeah,
surname now.
she painted 100 paintings. So one
Yeah,
painting for 100 of her best friends,
yeah,
brought them all together to honor them and demonstrate her gratitude. And
yeah,
I think, as you were telling those different stories, you could see the effort, the focus, the reason, the why behind the what you
yeah.
were doing, and the stories brought your principles to life, which was really, really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, never tell a story without a point. Never make a point without a story. I didn't say that. Someone much smarter than me did, but it's a great reminder.
Thank you for reminding us about that. Powerful. Awesome, Mark. So, we could talk more about your TEDx talk, and I'll definitely link that in the show notes so that everyone can watch it. For all you listeners out there, let's get it to 5 million, views. It's at 1.3 million now. Let's get it to 5 million. Everyone needs to hear that talk. So, Mark, tell us about what work you're doing right now. You recently founded Storycast to help leaders harness the power of personal storytelling in a world flooded with information. What makes a personal story truly magnetic, and how can leaders find and tell the stories that matter most?
Love that question. So, the quick sort of background to that is, as you know, and as I mentioned, I host and I hosted a podcast since 2015 called The Unconventionalists. And in those conversations, I would interview a wide range of thought leaders, business leaders, athletes, artists, politicians, and best-selling authors. And I always joke about this. When I launched it, it was kind of the Diary of a CEO before the Diary of a CEO was the Diary of a CEO, except I didn't have the vision. I didn't have the grit, the commitment, the consistency, or the budget that Steve and his team did. But that's what I used to do. I used to interview people about their stories and get people cry on my show, and create this space and mix my coaching background with my commercial journalistic background. And anyway, but the reason why I'm mentioning this is I would interview about their stories, and at the end of it, offline, I would ask them, have you ever shared this story before? And most of them would say, no, I've never. And I would say, why? And they would tell me a reason. And over the years, I collected these reasons, or these excuses, or what I would now call in my book, Glow in the Dark, story blockers, right? There are 9 effective story blockers. I won't go through them now, but it's anything from I don't see how my story is relevant, to I don't want to make it about me, to I don't want to upset people with part of my story. I don't want people to think that I'm using my story and milking it for the benefit of my business. Like all of these, I don't know where to begin. I don't know what parts of my story are relevant, all these things, right? And so I was baffled because on one side, I was inspired by their stories. But more than that, I was getting messages, emails, or DMs from people listening to the show saying, thank you so much for interviewing X. As a result, I bought their fill in the blank, their book, their product, their program. I've applied to work for them. I'm joining their retreat. So I had like a front row seat of seeing the impact that people sharing their personal stories had on their business outcomes, right? And yet, we had all these leaders and people around the world just not sharing the story. And so that's how the seed was planted. So fast forward, and I'm going to make it a really quick summary. I start pitching my book around publishers, my literary agent, and we get a few offers, a lot of no's. I'm just going to say that out there before I sound like this sort of hotshot author. I was not. I didn't have a big enough audience. I didn't have a big following. Didn't have a big reputation, a big name. So, but we got a couple of offers, get the offer, end up writing the book Glow in the Dark. One of the most amazing and difficult, painful journeys I did, because as I mentioned, I'm dyslexic. For the people listening to this who want to have a bit of a win story, the books I used to read at school, or the books I used to struggle reading at school, were published by a major publisher called Hachette. They're one of the top publishers like Penguin, but basically in France. And they used to publish the school books. So I hated them. They're the ones who published my book. So my book, Glow in the Dark, is published by Hachette, which is
Yes.
hilarious, right? Like,
Yes.
so anyway, and so I started working with leaders would reach out to me and ask me, can you help me unpack my story? I've built this business. I'm operationally sound. We are financially sustainable. And I feel like there's this other level to me that I'm really not tapping into. I'm not like, my team doesn't really know who I am. I'm not connecting with them on a deeper level. I'm being asked to speak more on stages or on podcasts or in media. I'm very uncomfortable. I don't want to be in the spotlight, and I don't want to have to talk about myself. Like, a lot of these conversations, right, were coming up. And again, I'd walk them through a process, a framework, a program, and I'd see the impact. It was life-changing. It was transformational, not just for their business, but for themselves. And that was the content I put in Glow in the Dark. And so I put Glow in the Dark out into the world. As you know, it broke the internet when it launched for other reasons. And so I started getting some, again, feedback of, I love this. How can we actually implement this? How can we, originally, this is honest truth. When I wrote the book, I had a very clear avatar reader, right? My avatar reader was a founder CEO of a 7-figure service business who is interested in entrepreneurship, personal development, and making a difference, who knows deep down they have a story to share. They don't know how to do it. They want to have a bigger impact. They want to leave a bigger legacy. They want to connect with their team on a deeper level. They want to connect on their customers on a level that engages and inspires action, but they just don't know how to do it. That was my avatar. And in fact, Donna O'Toole, I often credit her to this, was one of my clients. She was often one who I was thinking. I had a picture of her on my desk. I call it audience of one in the book, if you remember. Yes. Is that when you share a story, you think of one person, right? So I only thought that this was going to resonate with entrepreneurs and founders. Turns out I start getting messages or tagged on LinkedIn by people working in companies who are using this book with their teams in offsite leadership summits and retreats,
Amazing,
all staff training, to create a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, a sense of oneness, a sense of alignment and engagement within teams by enabling them to show up a little bit more and show a bit more about themselves and feel a little bit more engaged with who they work with. And so that was when the kind of penny drop moment happened, where I started implementing more of Glow in the Dark, or also known as humanizing leadership, as a keynote in companies that you've mentioned at the start. And for example, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to London for a huge financial data company, speaking to 500 of their leaders from across the globe coming in, and I'm doing the closing keynote. And it's about the power of personal storytelling when it's done in a strategic, compelling, authentic way, and how it can really create incredible teams. It can inspire people to want to get involved. But really, if I had to be honest, if I had to boil down all of it, it's how do I get someone to care about what I have to share, say, or sell? That is really what, fundamentally what it is. And I'll finish off with this, because you know me, I never shut up. When I wrote Glow in the Dark, I had a secret Trojan horse. And the Trojan horse, which I don't talk about out loud because it can scare people, and I know you can take it, and I know that the people listening to this will also have an ability to maybe resonate with this. The Trojan horse of Glow in the Dark was healing. And the reason why I say this, and I have zero doubt that you do this in your work, is that people would come to me with the idea that they wanted to put themselves out there more, become more visible, grow their profile, share their story to inspire, attract better talent, have more loyal customers, fill in the blank. And I could help that through the tools I was using. What they would get as a result of it was a complete different relationship to themselves. They changed the way that they were maybe ashamed. So I often talk about this in closed circles, from shame to service. That really is what the work is about. So it's kind of like we all have a past. We've all been through things that we would rather forget. We've all been through things that we'd rather nobody knows about. And there's an expression like, it's the goal of every Englishman to go to their grave unembarrassed. I think that's John Cleese. But it was very much that, like, we all have these parts of ourselves. And what I learned through the coaching, through the leadership training that I was delivering, was that these parts of ourselves that we were rejecting, that we were afraid of, were getting in the way of connecting, because it was getting in the way of connecting with ourselves. I don't want to get too deep or too sort of, but really that's what it was about. So what I realized was that, yes, the tool I'm teaching you is to help you connect with others, but the ultimate goal, even if you never share it, is that you have a much healthier connection to yourself. Because when you own your story, which, as you remember, that was the name of my accelerator program. When you
Yes.
own your story, it changes the way you show up. It changes the way you lead. It changes the way you love. It changes the way you live. Because you're no longer, like, I think you experience the ultimate freedom, which is you're no longer afraid of what people will think or know about you. I often use the 8 Mile example. For those of you who don't know, 8 Mile is a film with Marshall Mathers, better known as Eminem. And it's a sort of semi-autobiography about his life, but effectively he does rap battles. Again, for those who don't know what rap battles are, the principle is simple. 2 MCs, as in 2 people who rap, go at each other with a crowd surrounding them. A beat drops and they start dissing each other, i.e. they make fun of each other. They have to humiliate the other person, make them feel shame, and to the point where they have nothing else to say and the crowd just goes wild, right? So they're going back and forth, they're dissing each other, etc. They get to the final round and it's Marshall Mathers' turn. He gets the mic, he's thinking, and then suddenly he starts doing his typical kind of diss, and then he switches. He starts naming all the things about himself that you should never say out loud, right? Like he starts saying all the things that the other opponent could use as a weapon, right, against him.
Wow.
And by the time that he finishes all this, he says a line, I'm going to butcher it, but he says something like, F this rap battle, I'm outie. Now tell them something they don't know about me. Mm-hmm. And he drops the mic and his opponent's just speechless and everybody goes wild and he wins.
Wow.
And the reason why I use this metaphor is that if you can navigate life, you want to talk about greatness, I also want to talk about freedom and the sense of peace, is that when you accept the parts of yourself that are maybe not as lovable, maybe not as celebrated in our society for whatever reason, religion or what beliefs, you are able to have more empathy towards yourself, more empathy towards others, and you really, really show up in a more powerful way. And that's kind of like the deeper work that I love to do, through the work that I do. So when I go on stage and I talk about the tactics and frameworks and practical stuff, I always want to sprinkle a little bit of like sort of like healing dust in people in the room so they can sort of walk away going, maybe I've got something worth sharing and maybe it's okay for me to show up a bit more as myself.
Such a powerful, positive challenge, Mark, to encourage people to dig deep and do the deep work to heal and recognize that they can go from shame to service. I love that concept. And if you could leave our listeners, Mark, with one action that they could take today to start liberating their own greatness, what would it be?
One action to liberate their greatness. So I'm going to be biased and I'm going to say that your biggest gift that you can give the world is your story, because you've been through things, you've learned things, you can help someone out there who woke up this morning needing to hear your story to get a sense of hope about their future, and you can change the trajectory of someone's life, be it your customers who need to know about your service. Maybe it's a teammate that's struggling that needs to know that you've been through that as well. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's just a stranger that you and I are having this conversation. We may never meet the people listening to this. My hope is that someone who listened to this resonated with some part of it and has somehow a seed of belief that they have a story. Because I'll tell you what, the biggest thing that gets in the way of people seeing their story as a gift to liberate their greatness and to share their greatness with the world is to believe that their story isn't worth sharing. They think that there's nothing important. They don't think it's, and let me tell you this, they suffer from proximity bias. They're so close to the story that they don't see the value of it. They've been with it so many times that they don't even see why it's interesting. I have yet to meet anyone who hasn't been through something worth sharing that can provide context, that can provide hope. And so I'll close with these words, which is inspired is inspiring, and choose courage over clarity.
Amazing, amazing. So many gems, Mark. And I suspect I'm going to need to invite you back for at least another episode on this podcast. You've added so much incredible value. So thank you. I appreciate you. And I know our listeners will absolutely love this episode. So to all the listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us today for today's episode of Liberating Greatness. A huge thank you to Mark for sharing his heart, his wisdom, and his journey with us. And if you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone you know who's ready to step into their greatness. And you can connect with Mark on his website, www.markleruste.com, and I'll put that in the show notes. And we'll link everything in the show notes for you. Mark's TED Talk, his book, Glow in the Dark as well. So Mark, again, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to have you with us. Until next time, keep leading with vision, living with purpose, and liberating greatness so that you might inspire others to live, learn, love, and grow every day. We'll see you soon.